Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Deep Dive Film School uses the footage only for purposes of education, commentary, and criticism under fair use. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School.
This week we're going to begin our Richard Linklater Festival with 1990's Slacker.
Let's dive in. Everybody, it is the beginning of our festival of Richard Linklater films.
Yes.
Boy, I have to say, going back and watching this movie again, I truly realized how much of this movie formed my opinion of things that were cool in 1990.
Oh, no doubt. This movie is very 90s.
Man.
I thought I had seen this movie. I had not. So
What?
This is my first time seeing this movie.
You've never seen Slacker?
I apparently have not. I thought I had because I remember the camera going off the cliff at the end and all that stuff. But I have not seen this movie, I don't think.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
So it was really fun to revisit, or to visit.
To visit. To visit for the very first time.
Yeah, but being such the indie nerd, and when I was 16
Wait, is that
years
your
old.
impression of me?
No, that's my impression of me.
Oh, okay.
But seeing things that this inspired, like Clerks and Kevin Smith movies.
Oh, totally.
And a ton of other things. I've read Mike Spike, Slackers and Dykes.
Yep.
That as well. So I know its importance in the film history. And Richard Linklater, I think, is definitely someone that was on the ground floor doing something different.
Well, man, that's what kept going through my mind when watching this is, and this is a very particular time period that I feel really, I'm going to sound like I'm 200 years old here, but I feel really bad for kids nowadays that art is so accessible in a way, because it means that, you could be some ding dong sitting in front of your computer, and if your cat walks across the keyboard, it might show you something amazing, and you're like, I didn't know that existed. Whereas back in the day, and this is what watching this movie again made me think about, is I remember going to, we have a local theater here called the Tower Theater, and I remember going there in high school and getting the actual newsprint newspaper that showed all of the upcoming shorts festivals that they were doing. Or going around to Blockbuster's cult film section, and perusing through it and being Fishing with Gandhi, what's this? And watching these really weird one-off films.
We're definitely of the generation that grew up on Blockbuster, right? And
completely.
We would spend hours in there wandering around just looking at covers and saying, this looks cool, let's try this one.
And then maybe watching something and being like, wow, that was really weird. And thinking about movies that were really coming out during the same period of time as this, whether you're talking about mockumentaries like Man Bites Dog, or other indie films of the same realm, like Spanking the Monkey or Henry Fool. Right before this, you had something like Jim Jarmusch's Down by Law.
Sure.
You had just this and it was so cool because it was basically if you were cool and you were in the know, then you knew what these movies were, right? And if you weren't, then it was you were still watching. I mean, in 1990, what were the big movies that were coming out?
We should have looked at that. I'm not sure.
My Girl? I don't know. What kind of crap was? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the regular sort of standard movies that are coming out, because you think about it, this is right before Miramax. Yeah. And Miramax was sort of one of the very first champions of I think that these movies might actually have worth to them, and that we could actually recoup some money by putting these things out on a major scale. But Slacker was one of those. It was kind of to me, I think it was one of the very first pebbles in that pond that made people
No doubt.
start noticing this era of filmmakers.
A very important film for the time, no doubt. It helped create this indie movement and having these unique voices. This is a very unique movie.
Oh, yeah.
With unique characters.
Well, because they looked like regular kids, because they were, right? Like these are not actors.
They're not
they're not professional actors at all. And the voice, the overall voice that Linklater built, just had to be pulled from the slacker college kids that,
No doubt.
he
You
knew
get a lot of
in
bohemians
Austin.
and hippies and stuff in
Well,
here.
in Austin, Texas in 1990, I mean, that was the era, right? So if you go
Would this movie make you want to visit Austin, though? Because
it did
it frames it as there's a ton of weirdos there, man.
But for me, I was like, I mean, I remember seeing this movie and being like, oh my God, I want to go there, because I was in junior high when this came out, and felt very much like, the way that these people were talking and the things. It's interesting too, because the things that make up the majority of the conversations that these characters are having were totally what my zeitgeist was at that period of time, because like I was collecting books about like the Oswald JFK conspiracy, and I was like reading stuff about like it was the moon landing a hoax and all these things. And this is during a period of time, I mean, nowadays you go, conspiracy theories are scary as hell, like they're not cute and funny now. I think when this movie came out, it was still fringy enough. This is all pre-internet, pre-message board.
The internet ruined it all.
You don't have Pizzagate shit, right? Like, so you're not worried about like, oh, this is actually going to cause somebody to do something dangerous. Instead, the anarchists here are cuddly. Like they're funny, and they're these weird fringy characters.
You can see why this movie was so impactful. I think it had a very unique voice. Interesting concept on how you're kind of, the camera's just kind of floating in and out of these people's lives. It's a day in the life in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, and it starts to become this gag where you don't, when you're watching a conversation,
like, who's going to be the next person?
Who am I going to? Who's the camera going to follow next? And you don't really know who it hops to from person to person. And there's nothing other than the fact that you are following it from person to person. There's nothing linear about it. It's very much stream of consciousness.
Very much.
But it keeps entertaining these really interesting ideas. I mean, one of my favorites is Linklater himself as
the first scene,
who is the should have stayed at the bus station guy, right? Yeah. And I love, I quote what he talks about of his sort of dream logic. I quote it all the time because to me it's a perfect representation of sort of like quantum storytelling, right? This idea of this story could go off in 100 different directions just because we thought of 100 different directions.
Yep.
And I love that because it really does set up what the rest of the movie does.
Definitely, it's all about what's real and what's not real. We definitely get very deep into society and how it treats how it excludes a lot of people. I think we get a lot into the government, man.
Well, it's this general
there's
sense
definitely
of
that stuff there.
It's the general sense of mistrust, right? It's this general sense of unease
of everything
and mistrust in mainly younger people. It's the majority of our cast here are in their early 20s, although I do like that we get a handful of older characters who have kept that chip on their shoulder.
For sure. It's definitely a portrait of America at that time, but I also think a lot of things they're talking about are very relevant today.
Oh, completely.
And it's timeless in that way.
Well, and I think one thing that's interesting with that too is, this was a cultural touchstone. You think about it, prior to this movie, the term slacker was not used to the same degree when talking about Generation X as it was after this movie came out. Where you even had, like, at the time, newly elected President Bill Clinton even talking about this idea of railing against the so-called Generation X filled with cynics and slackers, right? And so it is this idea of, like, this really cynical generation that doesn't believe in things.
I would definitely say it is a generation that had a lot of great things to say, but very little action behind it. I think this generation, especially the one they're talking about here, is the generation that would watch Queen play at Live Aid and think they're helping. like like something like that, like
Yeah, for sure.
this is me helping. I'm supporting AIDS.
Well, and that's a really interesting little dance that Linklater does here, because obviously in the writing of the dialogue and being able to get so many of these amateur actors to portray all these characters, obviously this is a world that he knows very well, and these kinds of people he wanted to present in a way to make this movie about them. However, he dances this fine line that I only see every once in a while. And the movie that it made me keep thinking about is a really weird comparison, but thinking about the way that Tim Burton dealt with the family of the Dietz in Beetlejuice.
Sure.
Right? That really, for all intent and purpose, the kind of people that the Dietz are the kind of people who would totally go to a Tim Burton film.
That is an interesting...
Yet he makes fun of them.
Yeah.
He gets them dead on, right? He hits the nail on the head of who that family is, but at the same time, he's kind of making fun of them. And Linklater does the same thing here, where he knows the voice so well, he knows the argument so well, he knows exactly how to pattern this speech and these type of characters, while at the same time, gently poking fun at them. And you go, that's so nuanced to be able to do both things at the same time.
He's a very heady director.
He very much is.
And I think we'll discover that more and more throughout this festival. And, I'm someone who's never seen the before sunrise, before sunset, all that stuff. So I'm not super versed in Linklater. Obviously, if I haven't seen Slacker,
I'm surprised about that.
I've seen his bigger stuff and a handful of some of the smaller stuff as well. I think Boyhood is one of the great movies in the past probably 10 years, so I'm excited to learn more about him through some of these other storytelling devices. But I think it's super important to think about him as a director and how different things that he went on to do are. I think he's honestly a lot like Gus Van Sant.
Oh,
they
I could see
have kind
that.
of similar careers in that way, where they kind of came up at the same time.
Yeah.
But they also have these kind of long, drawn out movies. But they
Sequences
also
and then-
can
yeah.
direct a big blockbuster like Milk or Dazed and Confused or something like that. But you
Sure,
could
sure.
see elements of Dazed and Confused in this movie, right?
Oh, for sure.
And I've never thought of that movie as a stream of consciousness type of movie, but it totally is.
Oh, it very much
very
is.
much like Slacker.
It's a day in a life, right? It's
Exactly.
not the arcs that characters have. I mean, the only
But
difference
I love
is that
I had a
Dazed-
lot of fun with this movie.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I really did. I mean, there were certain parts that captured me more than other parts, but there's so many. Like, after a while, it gets like, okay, so who am I following? You're trying to keep up, and you're like, are they ever gonna connect again?
And they don't.
And that's fine. But you question that as an audience member. But I had a lot of fun with this movie.
Well, and I think that the fact that you're connecting, and if there's one sequence that's taking place that isn't necessarily your favorite, you just have to wait 5 minutes,
Exactly.
and now you're going to go into something completely new. I mean, you get everything from the great we've been on the moon since the 50s guy, who's just like it's called the brain drain, right? Like,
that
like
guy.
the people with the right kind of radios, they knew what was
The only
happening on the moon.
unrealistic part of this movie is that guy's not like, quit fucking following me, leave me alone. He's
Right.
like, yeah, cool, man, and then he keeps talking to him.
And he follows him the entire
Exactly,
way.
the whole way to where he's going, and he just like randomly runs out of the coffee shop and is like, "Hey, man, I heard you didn't have your friend," and he just
But I
starts
love
going into
that
this whole
because-
thing.
and
I do
again,
too.
like-
it's super fun, and the transitions are great here. I
and
have tons of fun.
If
with
we
those.
go back into that coffee shop right before that happens, we get the happy-go-lucky guy who his introduction is amazing, because we have the two older women, and the one woman is talking about the sense of the spice coming from Morocco and telling the
That's
story,
right.
and then goes, the next man who passes us will die within a fortnight, and then like
We gotta follow that guy, yeah.
because you're like, oh, he's gonna die really soon. And boy, everything wrong happens to him. He tries to get the paper and he puts the money in, and then it won't open.
I
for
definitely
him.
part of me wants to like keep following
That
certain
guy,
people, right?
definitely.
Like definitely that.
Well, and that's
person.
the same guy who then and my God, that next scene where he goes into the coffee shop, that is so what happens to me every time, which is the lady that's like, you should never sexually assault a woman. I should know. I'm a medical doctor with a yacht.
Do my
Right?
laundry.
Yeah, exactly. I've had that happening before. I'm like, oh no, the crazy person's talking. They're gonna pick me out, and then I'm like, yep, hi, yep, that's me. Like that happens too. Like there are just these amazing characters. I love the guy in the cowboy hat that they follow for a while, who just like.
I love the very first thing. Once Linklater gets off the out of the taxi and walks in, we get this accident at the beginning.
Oh, isn't that wild?
And we get this great shot of slowly panning down the street, and you eventually see the car that hit the old lady.
Yep.
Come back around and park, and then we follow that guy.
And it's this tiny little story about this son who ran over his mom. And then has a weird shrine upstairs, and like
some
all
Jesus
those
freak, and he's going through all these rituals.
Like all that stuff is, and you go, boy, that's a tiny little encapsulated 5-minute movie just right there. Now
but you're also like, I want more. But that's kind of the appeal of this movie, right?
Well, and it switches between a couple of different philosophies. One is just sort of this absurdist realism, like that guy, where we just get a little view into his life, and they're very quiet moment. That's a very quiet moment in the movie, and there's a handful of those. But then the majority of this movie is really soaked up by this sort of like postmodernist concept. I mean, this is a very, very postmodern movie. This is really looking at the cynicism of all these individuals, and they're following the cowboy hat guy later, kind of jumping around, but he meets up with the two women, and the one is having a total breakthrough day, and then the other woman is setting up her menstrual cycle with all those pots in the driveway. But what she gives to him is she asks him if he wants to take a card for an oblique strategy. And I don't know if you're familiar with the oblique strategies. This is something that was built by the artist Peter Schmidt and then Brian Eno, the music producer.
That's right, yeah.
They produced this deck of cards that's called oblique strategies, and basically it's for any creative type. You think of a question, or you're up against a wall of some kind. You draw a card, and whatever it says on that card is going to help you have a breakthrough. And so the cards do say things like, what would your closest friend do? Or another card says, try faking it. Or one card says, work at a different speed. And so some of them say things like that, but some of them are more talismanic. And one of them that actually doesn't exist in the deck, but the Linklater made on his own, that's a fictional version of the card.
Oh, okay.
To me is the standard bearer of the whole point of this movie.
Huh.
And it's the one that the cowboy hat guy draws. And it says, withdrawing and disgust is not the same thing as apathy. And you go, yeah, that's the slacker generation. That could be on the flag for the slacker generation, is like, it's not about apathy. Mm-hmm. It's that everything that's happening is so fucking stupid that we don't want anything to do with it, right? And that's not the same thing as full-blown apathy.
Yeah.
So it's almost like toying with the term slacker and then looking at all these characters who, you think about the two guys with their conspiracy theories about cartoon characters, right? Scooby Snacks. And then he starts talking about the Smurfs. And he's every time the Smurfs try to go off, man.
Colonialism and following the tribe and power in numbers.
Exactly. And what that made me think of is I was like, boy, that...
I love that conversation.
That is the prototype. That conversation to me is the prototype of the next 10 years of cinema. All the things that we love, whether it's... foot rub conversations in Pulp Fiction, whether it's if the Death Star had to be rebuilt by independent contractors who weren't part of the Empire in Clerks, right? Like all of these really funny postmodernist arguments that characters have had, I'm like, that was built in that cartoon conversation in the bar in Slacker, right? Where it was like, oh, those are the kind of conversations my stoner friends have.
Yeah.
They could totally be dialogue in a movie.
Well, you talk about the cynicism of this movie, and I would be way too cynical to write something like this. It would be impossible for me to write. Like, I'm not even sure how you cast a movie like this.
Yeah.
Because everyone's so weird, and no one really comments on how weird everyone is. It's just like...
Yeah, that part's left out.
Like I would just want to make fun of the people. Or in some
have
way
at
make
least
it a comedy.
one character when the hitchhiker gets picked up by the two car pro dudes.
Yeah.
Who I love that guy. I don't know
awesome.
who he is, but he looks like the Vigo the Carpathian, right? Like he totally looks like that dude. But like just when he's like, do you have a job? He's like, hell no, I don't have a job. I may live badly, but at least I don't have to work to do it, right?
That's
like
right.
like that, like in I agree with you. In a more cynical movie, that guy gets out of the car and we stay with the two dudes that were driving, and they're like, "Who is that creep?"
Yeah.
But that never happens,
Nope.
right? Everyone here accepts how strange the other person is. We have the burglar who ends up hanging out with the
That's
anarchist
one of my
for
favorite
hours,
scenes.
right?
That's one of my favorite scenes. The old man.
Who's like way more fucked up than that burglar could ever be, right? And he's
For
just
sure.
like talking about like
My favorite part is that at the beginning of those two people, the old man and his daughter, I think, walking out of the store, and the lady who's stealing shit, she's like, "Oh, she's in my ethics class."
Yep,
That's one
exactly.
of my favorite lines of the movie.
I forgot about that scene. That's so good.
And then you go back, and this guy is kind of robbing their house, and then he just sits and talks to him, and it's so strange.
And he's
it's-
talking
it's
about
not
like
anything I've ever seen.
pulling a Guy Fawkes on the Capitol building and blowing it up, and you're like, oh, he's an old anarchist, right?
Yeah.
And again, all these characters, they talk using bits of Nietzsche. They talk using bits of James Joyce's Ulysses. Like all the references here are so deep and heady.
I love the guy, and this one I thought was very relevant, and the slave mortality of the media you read. But when they walk past the homeless guy, and he's like, "See," and she gives him a quarter, and he's like, "See, you shouldn't do that," and all this stuff.
love that.
And what does he say? He says, "Suffering's not a bad thing." People, we've been programmed to think that suffering's a bad thing, but it's a good thing for the spirit and all this stuff. And it really cuts into this day and age that we're living in the Trump era, where it is very divided in this country now.
See, that's one of my favorite scenes also,
Same here.
because he says that, and then she says to him, and this is where I go back to that sort of Beetlejuice making fun of the thing while also living in it.
Yeah.
She says to him, that's what I hate. When you start talking like this, you just pull these things in from the shit that you read. You haven't thought it out for yourself, no bearing on the world around us, and totally unoriginal. And his response to her is, well, at least I'm citing sources, right? And you
Accurate
just go,
sources.
yeah, and you're like, oh my God, that's so
Yep.
perfect, because again, it's like, and we have that so many times here with the three guys standing by the bridge, and he's actually one of those guys where he's like, throw the typewriter in the river.
That's right.
And he's like, he's never gonna fuck her in that tent, right? And like, and then he tries to get him to read part of Ulysses, and he's just like, these two guys don't want to have anything to do with it, but he's like, the typewriter represents the girl that screwed him over, and the girl that screwed me over, and he's like, he wants them to be a part of his symbolic thing, even though it's the other dude who got cheated on, right? Like, I love those little nuances.
What would this movie look like if it was made today?
Oh, I still think that you could have so many of the same characters.
Really?
You might slightly switch. I mean, again, okay.
You would bring in screens, I think, for sure, right?
Well, but you even don't need to. You could have the guy that's obsessed with TVs, right? Where he's like,
guy.
oh, back when I used to go out, right? Like when he used to go outside,
There's
and he's
some
like,
Benny's video shit going on with that guy.
totally. Well, and what he says. Good Haneke reference. But when he says, he saw the guy get stabbed coming out of the bar, and he says, and this, I was like, oh my God, this is so prescient. He says, I didn't see the actual stabbing. He's like, I can't rewind to it. I have no reference for it. I just saw it in real life. And I was like, oh my God, that's so many kids I know nowadays who have to take a picture of everything for Instagram, like coworkers of mine. And I'm like, oh my God, man, like no, you can be in the moment. You don't have to relive it like that.
Yep.
But this guy with the TV, and so like you would still have some version of him. Maybe instead of the JFK, I love the Conspiracy a Go-Go.
Oh yeah, that
guy.
became a real book too.
That's right, it did. Well, and I love, and it's a small joke in there, but he references also wanting to call it Profiles in Cowardice instead of Profiles in Courage. But you would just replace that guy with a 9/11 truther, right? Like you could seriously go through and just chop this up and make a new version today, and very little would change in that way. Although I would say the difference is that there is a quaintness in the conspiracy theories here that reminds me more of early 90s anarchist bookstores. This, because I mean, and even the term slacker, what it always makes me harken back to is the fake religion, the Church of the Subgenius. Do you know about the Church of Subgenius?
I don't think so.
With J.R. Bob Dobbs, and they're the people who belong to this fake church. One of the guys from Devo is like one of the priests in this church, and it's a fake church called the Church of the Subgenius, and they're all about slack. they're like, no, 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 don't take sides on anything. Just be a nothing. Being a nothing is way better. And you know, that this idea of this kind of cultural, what they refer to as culture jamming, right? So making fun of religion by creating a fake religion, or making fun of conspiracy theories by doing a movie like Slacker and having the guy who's like, we've been on the moon since the 50s, right? You're taking this thing that's already out there, kind of in the fog of society, and turning the volume up to 100 in order to kind of like juxtapose like, okay, this isn't actually like preaching this conspiracy theory. This is like going out on a limb to be even weirder, right?
Yeah.
And
oh no, it does.
I love those kinds of, because again, we have these whole conversations with these dudes, white guys with dreadlocks, like getting stoned and being like, Freemasons, man, it's all the Freemasons, right? And I love all that because it reminds me of the old punk rock anarchist bookstores, right? Like you go to someplace like Portland and you're going to totally walk into one of those bookstores and have some guy talk your ear off for an hour and a half about the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill.
For sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of generational angst that we have here, right? And I think it would be really fascinating to see this made in this day and age. I think that's really fun. I
would also love to see...
This whole movie was really fun and weird. You could see why it was revered, I think.
Well, I would love to see a person in their 20s now watch this and see what they think of it.
Yeah.
Like, would they be like, ugh, like this is all so played out, or would they get it? Like, would they find it entertaining? Because to me, so much of it...
But it's also, I think it's made for people that love My Dinner with Andre and stuff like that, right? Where it's really that existential...
Yeah, if you're sitting and going, what's going to happen? Like, this isn't the movie for you at all.
Like, if you need shit explained to you, like, this is a different world that he's created. But I thought it was just really fun, and I had a great time. I was really surprised I hadn't seen this. I thought I had seen this movie.
I'm amazed
but I started watching it, I'm like, I don't remember any of this.
Wow.
So if I have seen it, then it was forgotten.
And I remember it very much like I remember My Dinner with Andre, where every minute or two I'm like, oh yeah, this part. And I just like, there's so many incredible performances from these no-name actors that never went and did anything else, where you're just watching like, oh my God,
I'm kind of glad though. If it had like
it feels
someone
real.
Like, oh, there's a young, I don't know who's from Texas. I don't know. Ben Affleck? There's a young Ben Affleck.
There's a lot of the Owen brothers. I think they're both from Texas.
There's a young Owen Wilson. Look at him, man. He's just a kid.
But instead you get like the weirdo guy that's driving his car around at the very end with the microphone. And he's like, and we'll have guns and fucking sticks with points on them, and we're stabbing at people. I want to see people putting packages inside of cars and cars blowing up. And you're just like, I love it. It's amazing. Like watching just this tapestry of weirdness, right?
It's definitely a weird movie.
And such a particular era, such a particular generational era.
No doubt. The Slacker generation, for sure.
Yep.
I was really happy to watch this movie. I could tell within the first 5 minutes why this movie
matters.
It's
kind of a thing.
Especially in the history of film and the time it came out. I can definitely reference exactly everything they're talking about.
Yeah.
And reference the movies that it inspired. Clerks. This movie was made for $23,000.
Yeah.
And Clerks, I don't think was made for that much more. But like Clerks you can see how he got the inspiration from that. But at the same time, I remember watching Clerks, and obviously I saw that before this. That you had never really seen people talk to each other like that before, right?
Exactly.
You've never really heard people talk about Star Wars together like that before,
exactly.
Right? It's that
fly
on the wall stuff that, that's basically what this podcast is, right? So, I definitely think we come from this generation,
completely
this say a lot of shit but no action generation.
Well, and just the conversational acrobatics that I feel like we kind of grew up
first
with.
movie, Kicking and Screaming,
is one of my all-time favorites.
It's kind of in the same vein.
Mm-hmm.
So
you can sit and watch somebody talk about the remote control for 10 minutes.
Absolutely.
And that has its own sort of worth and value to it. And maybe that is like a very talkies 90s kind of a thing, but it's fun. It's always fun to me. It's the same reason why I love so much post-punk music, is I love going back and being like, listening to something and being like, this came out in 1973, and it breaking my brain because I'm like, oh, this is one of the keystones that everything else filters out from, and Slacker is completely that, where you can watch it and go, oh, I see how this influenced all this other stuff.
Well, we're gonna do Suburbia as one of the next ones.
Yeah.
And I think that is an even newer '90s version of
The same kind of
like a late 90s version of these types of characters, like the Slackers. So I'm
excited to watch
excited to see that one. I have seen that one.
I haven't seen that one.
Okay, great. And then we're also gonna do
Then we're gonna do A Scanner Darkly.
yes.
And then finally we'll end with
Boyhood,
Yep.
and then Suburbia, like
Yep.
we just
Yep.
said. So that is the festival. So if you want to follow along, please do. Please like and subscribe if you like what you see/hear.
Yes.
Thank you for listening. We're excited to get into this.
definitely.
All right.
All right, we'll see you guys
Thanks,
next
all.
week. New me. Do you do any New Year's resolutions?
I guess when it's warranted.
I don't do any New Year's resolutions, but I always feel like after because I take off, I get like 2 weeks off.
Yeah, same.
And so it's like I'm like so bloated with like food
Yep.
and treats and alcohol and everything else that I'm like, when the year starts back up, I'm not like,
I got 2 birthdays in December too.
yeah.
So
Yeah. See, and I don't go like, it's time to hit the gym, but instead I'm just like,
I need to eat better.
I'm getting back
Everyone
to eating
goes through
better
that,
and
yeah.
getting back to doing more exercise and things like that, and kind of buckling down with that, but not like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I set goals and stuff, but like, I think last year I hit almost all of them. So
It's all subjective too.
Yeah.
Like it's just a completely fabricated milestone, right? Like
totally, because of a number.
well, and Abby worked, she was on call, and so she was out when midnight hit, and so I was here by myself, and I just like,
Kiss in your hand.
yeah, I kissed my I love you too. No. God, that would be so sad.
Or maybe it's a pillow with like Zach Morris's face on it. Something like that.
That's weirdly specific, Adam.
I'm just saying. I don't know.
You're not. Look, I'm not saying I have one. I'm just saying.
I mean, teen beat.
You sound like you're an octogenarian. He said, "Isn't that what the kids like? Is Zach Morris?"
Yeah.
Is
That's still a show?
Yeah, they take a Zack Attack. What's it called?
Zach Attack, yeah. Casey Kasem, yeah, I remember. I know. I've seen all of the Saved by the Bells. Don't mess with me on Saved by the Bell. Do you know what AC for AC? AC Slater.
Yeah.
Do you know what AC stands for? Do you remember?
No. What
No.
is it?
Just a little Saved by the Bell trivia for you.
For anybody out there
who's
who may
reaching
know
for
what this is.
Albert Clifford. He changed it to AC because it was too nerdy.
I mean, it's super nerdy.
It is, but he's not nerdy. He's fucking AC
No,
Slater.
he's Slater, man. He's super cool.
Yeah, he's got muscles.
That's who's on my pillow that I kissed at midnight.
AC Slater.
It's AC Slater.
It was me who had the Zach Morris pillow.
Yes. We should get them together and make them kiss.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay.
Cut holes in their mouths.
Oh my God. For what? Why?
Fingers.
Oh my God.
What else would you put in there?
Nothing. I would put nothing in there. I would hide my secrets.
You would hide your secrets. That's where your secrets go.
Is inside the cut hole in your pillow. Jesus. All right, I'll find something to do with that.
I don't know.